Evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight as we take a trip down memory lane to learn about the history of John Carroll's first intercollegiate athletic team, the men's basketball team. My name is Rory O'Neill, Director of Major Gifts here at John Carroll, and I'm a proud member of the class of 2006, and most importantly for tonight, a former member of the basketball team here at John Carroll. Now, if you're a longtime supporter of John Carroll Athletics and the basketball team, you don't recognize me. Don't worry, you aren't alone. I hold the distinction of being one of the worst basketball players in the history of this basketball program, but I'm blessed to be a member of the 2004 team that made it to the Final Four, a very unused and for good reason member of that team. So, but I'm extremely proud to be associated with John Carroll, with this team, and with tonight's program. I'm excited to have you all here so we can facilitate tonight's program. So, just some housekeeping for tonight's program, guys. Please, everyone in attendance, please be sure to mute yourself if you're not already muted. Put yourself in speaker view so you can enjoy tonight's program the best. And if you have a question or comment, or you'd like to ask a question at the end of the program, use the chat function at the top of the interface here, and we'll try and get through as many of the questions at the end of the program as we can. So we encourage you to ask questions, provide comments, and we'll try and get to all of them, okay? Tonight's program is a part of the John Carroll Office of Alumni Relations ACES series. ACES is an acronym for Alumni Continuing Education Series. The ACES program has been around here for years at John Carroll, but since the coronavirus pandemic began this past March, it's been one of the most consistent programming opportunities for Carroll alumni during the pandemic to engage, albeit virtually, with their alma mater. So we encourage everyone here tonight to join us for future events, and please check out the Onward virtual newsletter that hits your email boxes, and check out the Alumni Relations homepage for more information on future events. A co-sponsor of tonight's program is the Blue Gold Club. The Blue Gold Club is the official booster club of John Carroll Varsity Athletics. Created in 1982, the mission of the club is to promote, support, and recognize varsity athletics at John Carroll. In addition to hosting the Hall of Fame banquet each year in the fall, the Blue Gold Club has supported recent projects like the Letter Award winner program for all student athletes, multiple renovations and upgrades to the varsity weight room below Shula Stadium, which every student athlete uses every year, and a recent renovation this past summer of the Blue Gold Room above the Herb Isley Blue Gold Room above the DeCarlo Varsity Center. This is a space that holds a special memory for a lot of John Carroll basketball alumni. So if you get a chance to visit campus when it's safe, please let us know so we can show you the room. It's really a great renovation. Additionally, this past year, the club allocated money to support the development and production of Through the Years, the first 100 years of men's basketball here at John Carroll, a history of the basketball program at John Carroll. So that was written by Brian Fritz, an alum, and it's the impetus for tonight's program. So tonight, we're going to learn how the men's basketball program at John Carroll began, how it developed over the years, learn about some of our more noteworthy players, infamous contests, indelible moments, and where the team finds itself today amidst an international pandemic. So first, we're going to talk to Brian Fritz, who's going to walk us through the early parts of John Carroll basketball, discuss the book. We're then going to speak with Hall of Fame coach Mike Moran, who was my coach, who was then the head coach from basketball here at John Carroll from 92 to 2017. And then we're going to close out the segment by having a short discussion with our current coach, Coach Pete Moran, who is my former teammate. Again, if you'd like to submit a question during tonight's program, please utilize the chat function at the top of the interface. So now to introduce our first speaker. Brian Fritz is a proud member of the class of 1975 here at John Carroll. Brian has worked for 41 years as a prosecutor in the city of Cleveland, retiring last year. Congratulations, Brian. Brian is no stranger to John Carroll Athletics, though. He's worked on the JCU football stat crew for the last 39 years, as well as the basketball stat crew from 1982 to 1992. He's written histories on the John Carroll football team, as well as compiled lots of research for our sports information department on the JCU men's and women's basketball teams and our hockey program. He's also the author of a history on League Park, the historic home of the Cleveland Indians with Ken Krasalovic, who's a former sports information director here at John Carroll. He's also been a very loyal supporter and donor to the Blue Gold Club since its origin in 1982, and he is the author of Through the Years, the first 100 years of John Carroll basketball. Brian, I want you to get us started. How did John Carroll athletics begin? How did our basketball team begin? Where was it? Was it in University Heights? Was it somewhere else? Was our name even John Carroll? And was our mascot the Blue Streak? How did it start? I'm going to share my screen here and set up some slides here.
Okay, there we go.
We're all set? Okay, good.
All right. Just a quick thank you to the Blue Gold Club for sponsoring this, and certainly to Chris Wensler and Sports Information who helped out, Lorraine DeSillo over in Archives, and certainly Stephanie Lentz who did the design and the layout of the book. That was so important. They did a great job. But getting on to the actual history of John Carroll basketball, of course, it started as St. Ignatius College. And that was at St. Ignatius, where the high school is. The first game they played at home was behind the school. It was a gym they built in 1913, and it was against the Forest City Knights of Columbus team. So it was, they played different groups. They played alumni a lot of times and counted those as regular season games. And actually the 1919-20 season, even though it's considered the first, there were other teams representing St. Ignatius College before that. So this was maybe not the first time they were actually in competition, but certainly the first time it's considered as an actual varsity event for the school. And they played their games, as I said, on this gym that was built on campus. And the early years, they ended up playing a lot of this local schools, and one of the usual trips they would have, their road trips, they'd go to like Detroit and play University of Detroit, and go across the river, play Assumption College in Windsor, or play Michigan A&M, St. John's in Toledo. Those were the different schools that they would play. Those would be the road trips, or up to Buffalo to play Canisius, and then Niagara. So those were the games they played, and they were competitive some years they weren't. But then as the years went by, the gym was not that great, but they still used it, but they did use some of the other venues. And that was one of the great stories of John Carroll basketball, is all the different places they played. For example, Public Hall, which is downtown, was built in the 1920s, and John Carroll played there. The first game they played there was in 1927. And they played there off and on for over the years. They also ended up moving to different locations downtown when Public Hall maybe wasn't available, or that wasn't the best choice. In the early 30s, they were talking about the movement to University Heights. So before they did that and started moving the games, they would still play a lot of the games downtown. And one of the places they played downtown was the Cleveland Athletic Club, believe it or not, which is, it shows what it was like where the gym would have been. They played some, in the early 1930s, they played games there. And that's a multi-story building. It was probably kind of amazing. You're playing a college basketball game in this facility in downtown Cleveland at an athletic club. They also played at Gray's Armory, and that was in the 30s. And if you ever go to a baseball game, if we can go to baseball games anymore downtown, you may want to walk over. It's just a few blocks from Progressive Field. Gray's Armory was an armory for the Cleveland Grays, and they had a big auditorium there. And for 1 year, John Carroll played a few games there. So that was kind of interesting when I talked to the people there about Gray's Armory, and they really had no idea that there was even basketball games that had been played there. So those were the main venues. And as they were still looking for places to play, since the gym at St. Ignatius was not that big, and the move to University Heights was taking place in the 1930s as well. And when the plan was to build this nice new gymnasium in University Heights, which of course didn't come until many years later. So they did have on campus, they played in a few times at actually it's Koulos Auditorium. There was a gym set up there. So they played some games there, but for the most part, they played at different places. They played in the Cleveland Arena, which was built in 1936, I believe, was built originally as a place for hockey, Cleveland hockey. And the owner of the arena decided, well, we needed to fill up the arena on different dates. So they scheduled many basketball games there. And so there would be frequently double headers or triple headers even for basketball at the Cleveland Arena. And John Carroll actually played the very first college basketball game at Cleveland Arena, beating the Fenn Foxes. And Fenn, of course, turned out to be Cleveland State years later. The arena was a great venue, and as it turned out, it was later the venue that hosted the Cleveland Cavaliers. So the Cleveland Arena was one of the places they played. They also did a couple of other places. They played at some of the high schools. They played at Cathedral Latin High School in University Circle, and that was quite a nice facility at the time in the 1930s. Case Tech also played a lot of games there. And they also played at Benedictine High School when they built their gym in 1940. Now that's not even the gym that they use now, but that was a big gym at the time. And so that was one of the places that John Carroll played. So over the years, they did play in several different places. When John Carroll in the late 40s and early 50s was trying to go big time, the Cleveland Arena was the main venue for those games. I mean, they played Notre Dame there, they played Santa Clara, they played Hawaii, they played a lot of these big names, schools that wanted to come in and played in Cleveland at the Cleveland Arena. But as big time basketball really didn't work out that well, they ended up playing the next time after all the Benedictine and Latin, St. Edward High School in Lakewood. Built a new gym. And so for the 1952-53 season, John Carroll played their home games at St. Ed's High School, way on the west side, which would have been nice, except that it was still kind of a trek from campus. So that was kind of a problem. But they played there 1 year. And then after that, they ended up moving the games to a new gym that was built in East Cleveland at Shaw High School. And Shaw High School had built this new gym. So John Carroll played there for about 4 years. And that was the place where like George Dalton played many of his games. And it was a nice, relatively close venue to campus. And that was the last place that John Carroll played other than, the arena sometimes, other than until they built the new gym, which was built and completed in 1957. So then the campus finally had a home, and they finally started playing all the games on campus.
So Brian, over the years, there were lots of great games, great moments, great plays. I know you had found kind of 3 games from kind of the 60s, 70s, 80s you kind of wanted to focus on once we got to campus. Why don't you take us to the first one here, in the 1960s?
It was always interesting. When I went to John Carroll, I'd walk through the gym and you'd go by the trophy case and you see this basketball in there. And it was like, you look at it, it's like, that's a loss. Why did they have this basketball game? Basketball from a game that was a loss. But in 1962, Loyola, which was the highest scoring team in the country, ranked 9th in the country, comes to John Carroll. And John Carroll plays them at the Carroll gym. And the word kind of is that, they were playing them and suddenly at halftime, John Carroll's ahead by 34-31. And it was like, whoa, that's pretty cool. And the word kind of got around campus and more people came in, and the place was absolutely packed by the end. And John Carroll takes the lead, and Loyola ends up making a shot just about toward the end of the game. They missed the shot and they get the rebound and put it back in. So they take the lead and win the game by 1 point. Now Loyola, again, ended up going to the NIT that year. They were one of the top teams in the country. The following year, Loyola won the whole thing. They were the NCAA champions. So it was a game that probably defined basketball for the first, 40, 50 years at John Carroll.
Take us to the 80s here, and talk a little bit about, what the Tim Babb era. For those of you who don't know, Coach Tim Babb was the head coach at John Carroll men's basketball for 11 years in the 80s. He won 138 games, won 4 PAC titles, appeared in the NCAA tournament 2 times, and was also the soccer coach and the golf coach. And he had some really some great moments during this era, but you wanted to focus on this one. Tell us about, this game and some of the stuff around it a little bit.
Right. I mean, the game was John Colombo's final home game as a senior against Hiram. But just to back up a little bit and talk about some of the things you were talking about, when Tim Babb took over, he really put a lot of effort and got a lot of people to put a lot of effort into making these games a lot of fun and just an event, a circus. I mean, they got a pep band back again. They got cheerleaders. They got a dance team for the first time. They had the choir singing the alma mater. When the players were introduced, they turned out the lights and spotlighted the players. I mean, they did all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, they had everything they tried. It was like, let's try this, let's do this. And the place was so loud, it was so crazy. They even had cable TV back in the day before live streaming, and when cable TV was such a big thing. John Carroll basketball games were being cable streamed in Canada and different places. It was incredible. I mean, it was way more than Division I schools around Ohio. So it was just such an incredible event. Well, this particular game was John Colombo's final game. The Blue Streaks were doing very well. They were looking like they were going to go to the playoffs. And again, it was the highlight of everything. I mean, the place was packed. You had, smoke bombs. You had John Colombo and his pet snake were there before the game. At halftime, they retired his number. I mean, it was just incredible. One of the things that they did was the pregame warm-ups for the team was choreographed to music. And it was fun because they got the crowd involved with it. They'd be passing the ball back to people in the crowd. It was just incredible. And John Carroll goes on to win the game. Great second half. Colombo has a great game. And it was just an atmosphere like you wouldn't believe. And kind of the follow-up to that was that they ended up having to play a game at Case, who was the big rival as well, after that. And Babb and the crew decided, why don't we bring the show on the road? So what they did was they got all kinds of students to come to the game. They got several of them bringing boom boxes, and the game and the music for the pregame that they'd always do, they had over the campus radio station playing on it. So they literally took the show on the road and won the last game at Case Western Reserve, and it was pretty incredible experience.
Very, very cool. And then for those of you, the Alumni Relations Department here has a podcast series called For the Greater Glory of Pod, and they profiled Coach Babb and some of the craziness going around with John Carroll men's basketball in the early 80s. So in the follow-up email to this event, we will make sure you guys are available to see that podcast. This is a great listen. And
yeah, if you've ever watched it.
Yeah.
Okay. So. I was going to say, if you ever were around at that time, certainly go and listen to it. It'll get excited and pumped up again for the games. One other game I want to talk about was 4 years later, John Carroll is playing against Hiram at Hiram for the PAC championship. And it was kind of a tough year because John Carroll had a really good team, but they got filled with injuries. So they were basically struggling to survive every week. Craig Hoffman, of course, he got hurt for some. Andy Jahola was the one player that held the team together. So they come down to the last game of the season. It's at Hiram. And it was just a game that, the stands are packed, good number of John Carroll people there. And John Carroll played like the best game of the season. Everybody played well. They won by almost 30 points. It was just an incredible thing and an incredible way to end a season. And it was one of the great games of that area for sure.
Okay. Well, again, there's lots of great moments in John Carroll basketball history. Those are just kind of a few of them that you uncovered over the years. Let's talk about some of the more kind of famous players we've had. Some of the guys in your research you found were kind of quite remarkable, but also some guys who were great on the court, but who once they left University Heights, really made a name for themselves in their careers, and people that are worth noting here. So if you want to go into them a little bit here, that'd be great.
Okay, and then, again, there's plenty more, but you have to limit it for time. So these are just some of the ones you want to talk about. George Dalton if you're talking John Carroll basketball, that's, he was the gold standard for the first 50 years. He was the fourth player in college history who scored 2,000 points. He averaged over 20 points a game each of his 4 seasons. And those years, they were playing very good teams. They played Louisville, St. Bonaventure, Seton Hall, Georgetown. He was an All-American. He was a Chicago native. And, he just did it all. He did all the scoring, and everybody who knew him from that time just talked about how great he was. And it's like, you get him the ball and he's going to score.
Okay.
Johnny Dromo played in the 30s, and not a lot of people know about him, but they probably should, because Johnny Dromo ended up his after career. He had a good career at John Carroll, but afterwards he ended up getting into coaching. He coached in high schools. He ended up down in Cincinnati at St. Xavier, was coaching there. Ended up moving from there down to Louisville Male High School, was a coach there, and then got hired by the University of Louisville. And while he was at Louisville, he was an assistant football coach. He was the golf coach. He was an assistant basketball coach. And he ended up being, at one point, becoming the head coach. And he coached for 4 years and had a record of 68-23. He was there when Louisville got good. And he was, Louisville is, of course, one of the top teams always every year now, but he was there when they got good. And he was just an incredible coach. Ended up having a heart attack, and that's why he had to resign from his head coaching position. But again, one of the unknown names that certainly should be remembered. A lot of people don't know that Carl Tassef played basketball in addition to playing football. Of course, he's known for his career in the NFL and his association with Don Shula, but he did play basketball for John Carroll. He averaged just under 8 points a game his senior year, so he was just a very great athlete, one of the great athletes of all time at John Carroll. Tom Brazaitis, that's another story too. Tom Brazaitis was a class of 62. When he came to John Carroll from Collinwood, he got on the Carroll News staff and ended up being the Carroll News sports editor. He played basketball, was a good varsity player, 2-time captain of the team. And he was a 6'1" guard. After graduation, he ended up getting a job with the Cleveland Plain Dealer and worked for the Plain Dealer for many years, and was in fact the Washington bureau chief of the Plain Dealer for many years. He wrote several books. Just one of the famous people, if you ask people about the Plain Dealer, one of the big names from, John Carroll, who ended up being there and making a mark for himself. Rip Ripley. Now, you may not know who he is, but if you go to the Hall of Fame, the Basketball Hall of Fame, you'll see his plaque there. He was head coach for the Blue Streaks for 2 years. Back in the late 40s and early 50s. Didn't do particularly well at all, but he's a basketball Hall of Famer. He had coached at Georgetown, he coached at Notre Dame, he coached at Army and Yale. He later was an assistant coach for the Olympic team, Canadian Olympic team, for the Israeli Olympic team. He just did plenty of things. He actually coached with the Harlem Globetrotters for a while, and that's what brought him into the Hall of Fame. And like I said, he was there at John Carroll for a couple of years. It just did not do particularly well because he was from the East Coast and didn't particularly mesh with everything at John Carroll.
Hey, you got to be kind to this one because he's on the call tonight, so make sure you get his history right here, Brian.
Okay. Well, some people were great players. Some people had great careers afterwards, and John Stovall certainly did both. He was, as a player, he was a guard. He was a unanimous all-conference selection, averaged 20.1 points per game his senior year. Afterwards, he went on to a career. He coached at Valley Forge High School for 20 years and won 5 district championships. Made a Final Four appearance, so he was a great coach at Valley Forge. Then later came on and coached, was an assistant coach at John Carroll under Mike Moran. He also played in the very first game at the Carroll Gym. So one of the great players and coaches who went through John Carroll. And there's plenty of coaches that we can't even get to naming all of them who played at John Carroll who became very, very successful high school coaches. But certainly John is one of them. Ray Maria. As you can see, he holds the record for the most points in a game, 45, and that was back before the three-point shot. So he was able to put up the points. Played on that team that played Loyola in 62, and he scored 28 points in that game, almost won the game for John Carroll. Was a great player, went on to a career in the FBI. He was a little All-American while he was at John Carroll. And again, John Colombo that we talked a little bit about. John Colombo was an All-American player, and he was a guy who could do everything. He was a guard. He came from south of Canton, comes up to John Carroll, played 4 years. He played against actually 4 Division I schools during his career at John Carroll, scored over 20 points in every one of those games. He was a 3-time first team all-conference player, and he was just an incredible player, could do everything, played forward, guard, just did everything, could score, could rebound, could play point guard, did everything. He was drafted by the Cleveland Cavaliers in the 7th round, was actually the third and last John Carroll player to be drafted in the NBA. Rick Harris played.
This is not his playing photo, by the way. Just so
no, it's not. He looked nice in the uniform, but this is not his player photo. Class of '86. He came from Shaker Heights. Was a solid frontline player for the Blue Streaks. Very good player. Well, afterwards, he got his master's at John Carroll and went into broadcasting. So he was at WEWS in Cleveland. Ended up in Philadelphia, where he's at now. He is the president and general manager of the NBC television affiliate in Philadelphia. So certainly a person who's made a name for himself, certainly a great man of Carroll, just an incredible person.
And I think his nephew, Pete, nod for me here. I think his nephew also played on the team a few years ago, which is great. So
that's correct. And then Andy Jahola, what a great player. Again, talking about all-around players. Andy Jahola could do everything, came from Ashtabula. 4 years starter, started every game, scored 44 points in a game one year, and was his senior year. The team was 20-4, including one of the losses was to University of Detroit. Just a great player, could shoot the long ball, was a great guy underneath, played good defense, a true leader, just one of the great players. He's now the senior vice president of human resources for the Molded Fiber Glass Company in Ashtabula. Just one of the great, again, men of Carroll. Okay, and finally, let's talk about Ollie Dawson. I mean, his story is so incredible. Ollie Dawson was from the 1930s. Originally born in Georgia, moved to Collinwood, came to John Carroll from Collinwood. At John Carroll, he played varsity basketball, he played varsity football, he was a varsity tennis player, and he excelled in every one of those. He also was a boxer, and he also played baseball in the summer too, so he could do everything, just a tremendous player. He ended up going to South Carolina. The Oliver Dawson Stadium is at South Carolina State University. He went down there. He became the chairman of the phys ed department. He coached football. He was a head coach and was very successful, which is why they named the stadium after them. He also coached basketball, track, tennis, and golf. And even in addition to all that, because he had so much time on his hand, he taught Sunday school. So, I mean, he was just an incredible person. And the more you read about how successful he was and all that he did, it just, it blows you away what a great person he was and what a tremendous successful John Carroll alum that he is.
I think, Brian, you also mentioned previously that he was the first African-American to be inducted in the South Carolina Sports Hall of Fame, which is
That's correct.
a feat in and of itself.
And he's a member of the John Carroll Hall of Fame as well.
Also, yeah.
Of course.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for kind of walking us through the first kind of 67 years of John Carroll men's basketball. Folks, if you have a question or comment you'd like to submit to Brian, please use the chat function, and we'll address it kind of at the end here. Now, I'm gonna introduce our next speaker, Coach Mike Moran, my coach from back in the day. Coach Moran was the coach at John Carroll basketball for 25 years, the longest tenured coach in our program's history. He was, during his time, his teams brought in 10 regular season OAC championships, 4 OAC tournament championships. He appeared in the NCAA tournament 12 times, reaching the Sweet 16 6 times, the Elite 8 3 times, and the Final Four in 2004. Coach Moran was inducted into the Hall of Fame here at John Carroll in 2010, and the basketball court bears his name. Coach, welcome. And I think when we put the name Mike Moran Court on there, we had to swipe away a few neckties to kind of get him out of the way to get your name on the court. So thanks for joining us. Coach, when you came to John Carroll in 1992, what brought you here? What was the impetus for taking this job, going from a really great, successful high school like St. Joe's? And what did you find when you got here, the types of kids that you coached and the type of program that you find?
Well, thanks for the introduction there. I guess before I talk, in case I forget, I just want to shout out, thank a lot of people that have some success are what they do is they surround themselves with great people in that, and I don't even consider it being surrounded. I was blanketed with you look at Chris Wensler, God bless his soul, our sports information guy for years and years and years. Papa Flower is a film guy. I have to always be concerned with when he was filming. Never know where that eye was going to camera I was going to travel to, and that other people like Mike Sabigan, 30-some years he was with me as a scorekeeper. Only guy I know as a scorekeeper that got teed and thrown out of a game. Carnegie Mellon, I do remember that. Maybe some of you guys. I see Johnny Samo smiling a little bit. It must have been during his time. The coaches that I should say helped me. That it's kind of a partnership there. Of course, Coach Stavoli, who I love, Coach Stedman, Coach O'Brien. Those are the old timers that were involved in that. And I mean, I can go on and on with the coaching staff. Just great. Most of the other guys are younger than that. So please, if I fail to mention your name, don't get down on me. And the GAs, I'm sure all you players that are on there that has probably some stories about some of the guys we had, starting with the first guy, Shawnee O'Toole, and Spencer Rule, Bobby Zeman, and on, Tony Redding. Just outstanding people that worked probably 60-hour weeks at least, okay, to help our program become successful in that. And I just want to give a shout out to those people. Thank you. Brian, this thing you did today, this book you put together, is just, it's heartwarming. It's outstanding, really. And tell you what, you can truly get an appreciation of the university and the athletic program, the athletic department with it. I thank you personally for undertaking this thing. When I came, I had a few buddies here at John Carroll before I came. They're gone now, but Coach Volkman and Coach Regis Skate, we were teammates together in high school. They were a couple years older. I always like to add that in. But they're the ones that really initially got me interested. They said that the position was going to open up, and since they were high school coaches at one time and made the transition over to the college level, that it seemed like it would be a good meshing for me. So that's probably the initial reason right there. It went on my friend's word. And I had another good buddy of some of you older people remember Mr. Joe Farrell, who was the Dean of Students. He was very close friend of mine, and he was pretty instrumental in, in stirring my interest. I always thought John Carroll was always a sleeping giant, just because being from this area, I knew there was a wealth of talent here. And if you think about it, it's a Catholic community in many ways. You look at the strongest athletic teams, high school wise, they're parochial schools. At that time, you're St. Joe's or Ignatius or St. Edward's. I can go on and on with Gilmore's. And, there are always a lot of talent around here. I always thought, I wondered why the Division I programs weren't tapping more of it before I got going. Thank God they didn't. And then, the nearest communities that we were able to reach out to recruit were, right over the border, PA. Made a killing in that Pittsburgh area. I see a few of the guys down here from Pittsburgh and, Farrell, what is it, Farrell, PA? Where's my, Tice? Was at the Warren area, Youngstown area. All you had to do is travel across the Cuyahoga River to the west side to find good athletes. So there was always an abundance of that. We didn't usually make a habit out of traveling to Washington, D.C.
Coach, when you were hitting the road, you used to talk about the kind of qualities you would look for at John Carroll, and that the guys you saw matriculating here to John Carroll and playing on your teams, they kind of possessed a lot of the similar attributes and a lot of the similar qualities. Talk about some of the stuff you found over time that, John Carroll basketball players exhibited, both personality-wise, but also from a skill set that you kind of recruited a lot.
I'll tell you what, it doesn't take, I'm no rocket scientist, that's for sure. But from the big part of the job dealt with recruiting. When you'd bring a young man in to recruit, things we'd look for, and coaches, Pete, Coach DeVoe would tell you right now, you could tell, little things like, do they respect their parents when they just came to visit, all right? Little things like, the relationship between their parents. I always thought we liked guys that were dreamers, guys that, you look at a Carroll kid, you say, here's a kid that took a biology class in high school. He's going to tell you that he's going to become a doctor or a dentist. Or let's say a guy that did well in math and maybe took a stat course or economics course in high school, and he's going to become an accountant. I mean, those are guys that you want, because that, they have great vision, and that's helpful. We didn't recruit saints, and I know I'm looking at this screen right now, and I see a bunch of sinners in front of me too. But you know what? But I always thought our kids had enough common sense to know what was right or wrong. I tell people about when I first got the job, one of the first things I did, and some of you older guys might remember this, is we had a study table. And after about 2 weeks into the school year, I said, when do I have a study table? I'm penalizing myself. All these guys are smarter than I am. And the coaches said, really, there's a reason why they're here. Our enrollment department does a great job of screening, accepting good kids into the place. So, now you got dreamers, you got, kids with goals. They know why they're in school. It's a recipe for success. And that's what a Carroll kid is, He comes here, he loves the game, but he's going to be more successful when he gets out. He's going to be earning more than the whole coaching staff someday, and that's that was our prayer. And that when we brought young men in here, and most of the time that's true.
Thanks, Coach. Now, I want to kind of go down memory lane with it. There's too many games and too many moments to kind of relive for this time frame, but I want to kind of go over a few and have you talk about them. A lot of everyone who played in the OAC and the PAC and over the years knows that playing in Ohio Northern is a very difficult place to play, and it's a tough drive to get there. I think Brian told me in the lead up to this, that for the first 12 years, John Carroll was in the OAC. We lost every year at Ohio Northern. And take me to in 1999, you lost twice to Ohio Northern in the regular season, and you found yourself playing them in the NCAA tournament at Ohio Northern. Take us back to that game, relive it a little bit for us. Tell us kind of how the game went, what the ending of the game was like for those who weren't there, to kind of share that memory for us.
Cool. Well, thanks for bringing up those memories, Brian. Be a friend of mine. Yeah. You know, not only it was just a tough place to play and even dream about winning. The traveling was awful, man. I don't know how many snowstorms we got caught in, or the bus broke down. It just seemed like, you know, everything went wrong. And then you put Northern, and Coach Campoli was there, you know, when I started. You know, it was kind of a comical. Ada, Ohio is not what I'd call the action spot of the Midwest, that's for sure. And the first time I went there, you know, we always, you know, served the kids food after the games, win or lose. Sometimes if we didn't play well, the meal wasn't as good. Well, I understand that too. But after the game, I said to Coach Campoli, I said, Coach, can you recommend a place to eat? And he says, well, you're an 80, you know. And I said, I know. And he goes, well, you can either eat at Hardee's or you can go to the Dairy Queen. I kind of chuckled to myself. I said, come on, Coach, come on. I want to get the kids a nice dinner. And he says, well, Mike, put it this way. I own the Dairy Queen. Know where my competition is. It's Hardee's. So take your pick, you know. So, yeah, that was a tough place to win. The story you would tell is we're playing in the NCAA, and I think we had Larry Holmes at that time. I think we had Danny Coxon, and you know, a bunch of great guys on the team. Tony, were you on that team, Tony DeMichael?
I don't think so.
Those guys older than you. But anyways, somehow we hung in there, blah blah. We make a shot. Let me think how that happened. We threw one in right at the buzzer, boom, to win the ball game. And of course, we just went crazy. We didn't know how to react. You know, we're just jumping all over the place. Two of the officials go running into the locker room. You know, and then we're going in, and I see this one guy wearing the stripes, the criminal, and I get fired up just thinking about it. And he's talking to the official. I said, what in the world is going on? He's calling the basket off. The other two, you know, so obviously I got a little upset, you know, during that. And somehow my shirt or my coat got ripped off, and my shirt got ripped off. And I'm running around, and I'm saying some nasty words to these officials, figuring there's no way they're going to tee me because of what the controversy that went into the call of that. And so, long story short, we win the ball game in overtime. And Coach Campoli comes up after the game. He says, Mike, I knew you guys were going to win that game. As soon as I was trying to send my kids into that overtime period, and I couldn't get their attention. They were just staring at this maniac running around in the T-shirt, and it worked for us. And a little bit of motivation there. That's all. That was our first victory, I believe, over Northern.
That's great. You guys made the Elite Eight eventually in that year, so it was a great year. I want you to take us to 2003, 2004, which the year you made the Final Four. It was also the year you got the chance to coach your two sons, Matt and Pete. Talk first a little bit about what it was like to coach your two sons during such a great year. Was it fun? Was it difficult? Was it a combination of the two? I mean, take us inside that a little bit.
Well, you know, we've gotten close to, you know, making that trip, you know, to the final. Like, you know, we had some great teams, you know, in the 90s. Our first, you know, going back, thinking of our, you know, those first years of recruiting, our Pennsylvania connection and so forth. And I think it's our our luck, our dream really started coming true in 203, where we won the OEC championship, and I believe in 203 we beat Northern and then Capital. And the thing about back then, and even before that, when you guys played, the tournament wasn't set up like that. There were initially when we started. I could be wrong with this. Maybe Coach DeVoe will know. There were very limited number of spots to get in. I'm going to say maybe 32. Maybe it started off about 28, 32 in that. So to get in, you really had to do something. And in 203, we won the champ, beat Capital, and they had a better season record we did by a victory or two, something like that. And they were sure they were going to get into the NCAA, win or lose. And they had a big party celebration all planned on. It turned out that our victory over them prevented them, and then we went into the NCAA. Then the year after, our cardiac is that's where we got to the Final Four, and that we beat Worcester to get down to the Final Four. It just outstanding team. We were using our platoon out, operation and that. And things just fell into place for us.
Okay. The last game of the Final Four season, the pivotal game, was an Elite Eight game at Worcester. The year before, we lost at Worcester on a kind of a last-second shot. Take us into the game that got you to the Final Four. I mean, do you have a couple specific memories, some of the specific tactics you employed to kind of get us to victory?
Well, I'll tell you what. I remember a huge play by Meach. That was Demetrius Travis. They stole the ball. It was probably from Pete, I would think. We had Pete Moran and Pete Cook on the team. So both those guys shared that point position. So I had to be one of those guys that screwed that up. But somebody stole the ball. And I'll tell you, out of nowhere, Demetrius Travis came and sprinted the floor. And it was a great individual effort that just knocked the ball, went off his foot. And we were down by probably a double-digit amount or pretty close to that. And then one thing I always remember about that game is that we, guys that played, we always used a lot of pressure, and that just our philosophy about we used to like to let big guys handle the ball, just because they were like you, Roar. They couldn't make good decisions with the ball. So, anyways, in that ball game, they were forced. We made their big kids handle the ball in the back court, the front court, and then near the end of the game, when we had caught them and taken a little lead on them, at the exhaustion, you could just, two or three of their starters, who were the big kids, they could barely walk up and down the floor. Okay, and I could remember, their coach grabbing me and, pointing that out. He said, you wore us down. I mean, I should, I did. Our players did. Our platoon system did. That's what it's all about.
Well, Coach, talk about your platoon system real quick. So in 2008, 2009, your team won 21 games in a row, and it was a great kind of demonstration of how the platoon system you developed kind of was being implemented. Kind of walk us through where you came up with the idea to kind of substitute like that, where you got the inspiration for it, and what were some of the kind of the key attributes to playing like that?
Well, I'm going way back when I started. The formation of it was, my background was football. I played that in college, and back in the 50s. Now, I was probably just a first, second grader when the Chinese Bandits came around. That was an LSU football team that was coached by a guy named Paul Dietzel, who came out of the Army. And what he did is that he formed three groups. Now, the thing is, a little history lesson, back then in football, you didn't substitute like you could now, all right? In other words, if you were in a ball game and you came out, it didn't matter if your team had the ball or didn't have the ball, Okay, you came out, you couldn't come back in to the next quarter. That was the rules at that time in football. So he was trying to develop a system where he could keep fresh people in there and not you know lose an advantage situation. So he formed like three different groups. One was his best offensive group. One was his best defensive group, and the other were what he calls go group. These guys didn't know that they were crummy football players. They kept telling them they were good, but they made it all up with tenaciousness, play, and just toughness and that. And this is how that Chinese Bandit group got popular. In fact, they became more popular than the LSU team did themselves. They were on the front page of Life magazine, which was, people like myself and a few others, we remember Life magazine. But that's how the thought came across, to substitute by platooning. Tried that in high school, and we brought it here a little bit, but I think it really kicked in the late '90s, in the early the early 2000s, where we really got sold on it. And of course it's like anything, kids want to play a lot, and I don't know how many times we heard them come off the floor. Guys would say, Coach, I'm not tired. Like that was one of Giver's. Where is the Giver? Is he here? Yeah, one of his. He would come out. My son Matthew, and they'd be complaining that they're coming out of the ball game, and Coach Stedman would just say, "Hey, that means you're not playing hard enough." If that's the case, you better rest up so you get your mind straight. But that was kind of the feeling about it. We wanted to keep fresh bodies out there, and there's other points too. There's other advantages. I mean, I could go on and talk about it, but that's where it stemmed from. And and the thing about Division III basketball, you're the level of your talent. It's kind of straight lined. Okay, it's not like you got a 6'7" or 6'8", 9, 10 guy that's going to go into the NBA. You have very talented kids that have relatively speaking, they're pretty close talent wise. And you try to take advantage of that, and it developed camaraderie. Plus, the biggest thing is I think it helped us. Our kids became very competitive. Our practices were extremely competitive. I mean, that was kind of the nice thing about it, and didn't matter what string you were on. And that I had kids that didn't want to play with the other group, okay, because they thought they could, they were being put in a position where they would hurt the chances of the rest of their kids getting out there and playing more. So it worked for us, and I think Pete used it still a little bit, and it brought us a lot of satisfaction, put it this way.
Well, thanks. So before I bring Pete in, because I want to have him kind of talk about John Carroll basketball at present. Talk about a little bit, real briefly, what it was like to hand off the reins of the story program to your son in 2017.
Well, I tell you what, it's. I figured you'd ask me a question dealing with my family, and from Pat to Matt, to Pete, and that, I just want to say, and my players, coaches that are on this call, I cut my right arm off for you, every one of you.
All right, thank you, Coach. All right, Pete, you want to unmute yourself?
Let me finish that off, Pete.
Okay. Thank you,
my
Coach.
family, though, I cut my heart off. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Coach Moran. Sorry for interrupting. Folks, I want to introduce, if you don't know who he is, Coach Pete Moran. He is the 24th head basketball coach in the John Carroll basketball history. He took over the job from Coach Moran in 2017. He's in his third year. He was a former All-OEC point guard here as a player from 2003 to 2007. When he graduated fourth all-time in assists and fifth all-time in the number of games played. Like I said, he's in his third year, and in 2 of the first 3 years, he's led the team to the OAC championship game twice, winning in 2018 and advancing to the Sweet 16 that year. He's also a proud member of the class of 2008. He's a smart man like me, married a John Carroll girl. And Pete, real quick, for those who don't know, there is going to be a season here this year at John Carroll. Walk us through what's going on with the team. How are you guys dealing with trying to launch a season during a pandemic, and how are things going?
First of all, I want to echo, what my father said. Just want to thank Roy O'Neill, Brian Fritz, the whole John Carroll community for putting this together. Not only does it mean a lot to our alumni, but I think it means a lot more to the Moran family. But with that being said, Roy, this season has been extremely challenging. We just started practicing last Monday. We're currently on break. Students come back to campus next Tuesday. Obviously, we've been remote for the whole fall. We were unable to practice and really get any time. So right now, we're our schedule. We're only playing 12 games, back-to-back opponents. So Friday, Saturdays. The biggest challenge that we're facing right now is just getting these young men in shape. In their defense, they haven't had many opportunities, to get in gyms to play. To be honest with you, there's probably 90% of our players prior to stepping foot on our floor Monday hadn't played a game since we lost to Mount Union in the OEC championship in early February. So that, and then all the protocols and the testing that we're currently doing, it's been challenging. We've been doing 2-a-days, and I've been, myself and the staff, we've been working long hours, and but it's exciting, but it's also very challenging.
Pete, what was it like kind of being a kid in the stands, then being a player, then being an assistant coach, now the head coach, taking over your father? Walk us through kind of your experience here with John Carroll basketball over the years and what it's like to kind of lead the program after many years being associated with it in various ways, but now being the head of it.
You know what? A week after I got the job, they put my dad's signature on the court. Okay, that's a tough task. I mean, that's challenging. But at the end of the day, I think, that first year I lost 15, 20 pounds, and, soaking wet, I only weigh about 165 pounds. So, and I don't think the pressure, necessarily was from, the university or the alumni. It was more or less trying to please my father. That's where I felt the most pressure. I grew up in a Division III household. Okay, as a kid, playing video games, you're able to change players, change your, change some of your players on the video game. I would change my players to John Carroll players, such as John Samuel, Joey Bigler, Artie Taylor. I mean, those are my idols. Those are guys that I grew up as a young kid idolizing. And then you fast forward, and quick story. Once my father retired, they kind of transitioned him a little bit into development. He's not one to ask anyone for any type of money, but my father, myself, and you, Roy, remember one unique situation. We went down to Mason, Ohio, to see Dr. John Samuel, and we had breakfast with them. And you know what? I'm seeing across the table is just after we made the Sweet 16 my first year, and I had a great group of guys, and John Samuel told me, Dr. Samuel, I should say, told me, Pete, I really enjoyed watching all your games down the stretch. And he said, you know what, I'm on a text chain with about 10 guys that I played with. And I kind of got emotional. I don't know if you remember this or not, but we're in the diner, breakfast, and it really hit home to me that, here's a doctor, someone I idolized as a kid, and he's still following me. I think that, that moment right there really opened my eyes to what John Carroll means, has meant to me. Been blessed, met my wife at John Carroll, got 3 kids now, and, all the positive things that have ever occurred in my life, it all points back to John Carroll. So there's not a dollar amount I can ever give back to this university. I'm forever indebted to this university. They took a chance on a 25-year-old freshman. And I thank the Lord every day that I get the opportunity to come into this office.
So Pete, Brian talked about some of the more successful alumni we've had, kind of the first generation of basketball alums. Your dad talked about some of the qualities he used to search for. What are you finding today that you find both talking to our alumni, but also the kids that are currently on the team, qualities you see about John Carroll basketball players on display? I mean, what do you see that is consistent?
Well, our statement, our mission, or message, I should say, to recruits will never change. Okay, and it's like playing a broken record when we bring recruits in yearly, and I tell stories of all these alumni that I played with, and even alumni that I grew up idolizing. Okay, our message is very clear. It's you come to John Carroll for number one, the academics. That's most important. Let's be honest. Okay, will John Carroll set you up long term? Do we have what you want in education? Here's examples. John Samuels, Joey Bigler, Ryan Tyson, Sean O'Toole's, David Gibbons, Terry Walsh, Spencer Rule, anyone else, Paul Neerman, okay, how successful they are after the game of basketball, okay? That's our message. That's our first message. Number two is the social component of it, okay? If you choose a college, based off the academics, and then second is the social aspect. It's the friendships, okay, that people have, the connections that you make. College is supposed to be the best 4 years of your life. I guarantee you, anyone on this Zoom call would die to go back to their college days, just for one night maybe. But you're young, you're finding yourself, and we provide examples of former alumni, that we stay connected with. Every time I have a kid on campus, it's amazing. I could show them proof on my phone that I just interacted with about 3 or 4 alumni within the last 24 hours. So it's the relationships. And then the last thing is, and the easy sell is the basketball. It's the tradition that has been, in our program for 101 years. The tradition my father established for 25 years prior, that speaks on behalf of itself. We have more wins, more conference championships, more NCAA tournament appearances than any other OAC school. So academic, social, and playing the game of basketball, that's our message. And ultimately, Rory, what it does, it attracts the right individuals. Individuals that come for any other reason, any other order, that's not who we want. And at the end of the day, we don't get the greatest athletes, but we get individuals that love the game and have a deep desire to be successful beyond the game of basketball.
Thank you, Pete. I'm going to have a little fun here at the end. I'm going to show you a photo real quick. Hold on, let me turn this up real quick. I'm going to show you a photo. So this is a photo. Hold on. This is a photo from the 2018 OAC championship game. Can you see that, Pete? Yeah. Okay. So for those who weren't there, Pete's first year, the team makes the OAC tournament championship final, which is at John Carroll. It was a rowdy atmosphere, similar to the ones in the 1980s. John Carroll won going away. Coach Mike Moran was in his first year as a spectator. Several of these students from the student body were kind of ejected for unruly behavior. But it was this image that everyone saw at the end of the game, a very quiet and tame student section with, yours truly right in the middle. Pete, walk me through what you saw, what was going through your head when you looked down at the end zone, you saw this happening during the game.
Come on, bro. You can't put me in a spot like that, man. Come on. The picture kind of tells the story, man. I got nothing to say. You know how it means to me. Everyone on there knows that photo,
Okay.
Special, man. Special. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. And thank you, Coach. Thank you, Brian, for sharing your thoughts tonight. That's our program right here. But guys, there's a few comments. If anybody has a comment or a question they'd like to submit, please go ahead and do it. I just want to read one from probably the guy who's traveling the furthest virtually for this program, Mike Story. Brian, this question's for you. Mike Story, class of '64, who was in that Loyola game. He has this comment. He says, after Loyola scored to take the lead with about 2 minutes to go, our coach, John Keyshock, who played with George Dalton, decided that we would take the last shot. So with 5 seconds left, we got the ball with Don Gacy, our best outside shot. and Don's shot rolled around the rim, but then fell out. So, by the way, Jim Boland, who went on to have a career with the Cleveland Cavaliers, was also on that team. So, Brian, he just wanted you to know that one little bit of history right there.
Okay. Sounds like a great story.
Yeah, very good. Brian, I'm gonna take one question to you real quick. You know, some of the kind of hidden gems that we didn't talk about, guys that were great shooters in John Carroll basketball history, like some people that we didn't mention tonight that you'd like to kind of bring up real quick.
Just like if we're talking about great shooters, I mean, when I first started, Jim Peters was the star of the team, and he was a great shooter. He was a big player. He was another player that could do everything. And John Ambrosic, we only had him for 1 year because he had transferred in and he played only a year. But he was just a guy who could take over a game by himself, just a tremendous shooter. And the stories about how he'd start shooting and it'd be getting farther and farther from the basket, and he'd still be making the shot. So, I mean, he was a great shooter. Craig Huffman was unbelievable. I mean, here's a guy who scored 31 and 30 against the Division I opponents that he played against. I mean, he just loved to shoot, could shoot from anywhere. And he started without the three-point shot. It came in when he was there. One of the great shooters. And then, of course, you get the newer players. You get J.J. Richardson was just a tremendous, pure shooter. And, now Jackson Sartain, probably from this year's team, is in that category. And then there was Joey Bigler and Matt Zappatelli. That was another one. He was a great shooter. So, I mean, there's a lot of great people who could just flat out shoot the ball. And that's obviously D3. One of the things that, makes it closer to D1 is the guys who can just shoot.
Brian, what were some of the things that in your research and in your process kind of developing this book? And by the way, we'll talk about how to get this at the end of the thing here. But what were some of the kind of interesting notes that you found about the history of John Carroll basketball, little anecdotes that might not have made it in, but were kind of interesting little points of history or little things that you kind of discovered along the way?
Just there's plenty of things like the coaches were so incredible. A lot of the coaches in the early years had Notre Dame connections. So we had Tom Conley was a football coach, but he was a Notre Damer. He coached there. Gene Oberst, who was the athletic director, he coached basketball, and he was an Olympic javelin medalist, and he had a Notre Dame connection. There was Mike Koken and Nora Brasher. So there was a lot of Notre Dame connections, and even Rip Ripley that we talked about earlier had coached at Notre Dame. So, I mean, there was a lot of interesting things like that. And I didn't think we didn't really talk about Ed Janka, who's another name that's big. He coached for, I believe, 4 years at Carroll in the 70s. And, he's one of the big guys at Nike as far as their marketing and camps and everything else. And if I remember correctly, it was an Ed Janka story. He also gave me one of the funniest technical fouls I've ever heard of on a basketball court. You're playing a game at Carroll. Referees were letting a lot of stuff go. John Carroll goes down to the one end in the first half. Guy gets hacked. No foul is called. The opposing team gets the ball. They come running down the court. And as the referee runs by, Janka yells out, "Call the Red Cross, call the Red Cross," and got teed up for it. So, a lot of interesting things like that.
I want to just note a comment here in the chat from Mark Adamzak. I think it's Mark Adamzak. Yeah. Made a point of saying that, for those who played at Ohio Northern over the years, the upperclassmen, as a classic prank, would tell the younger players that when the polar bear's eyes, the Ohio Northern polar bears would run out of a giant polar bear head in one of their end zones, and they would say that the eyes would light up after a first basket. I fell victim to that prank as well, so that tradition lives on as well. So.
Rory, why don't you talk about, speaking of Ohio Northern, obviously, you had bad weather going there. It's in the middle of nowhere, but describe the gym, because playing in that gym is very unusual.
Well, it's very wide, and that the stands keep going further and further back. And Pete, if you'll recall this, their cheering section was right on the floor. They were in like that first row, right? Is like almost like the VIP seats for like a Cavs game. They were literally the first group. So you'd be passing the ball in and they'd be, you know, right here. That was difficult as well, I would imagine.
Yeah, you know what? I heard everything when I was playing then. Daddy's Boy, Screech from Screech Powers. You know, some old timer jokes because I was a little bit older than everybody else. But it's a special place to play. You know, they have the little track that's above the floor. It's a unique place to play. It's very special. And I've always enjoyed going there. You know, of course, after we won there the last couple of years, but you know, ask me maybe at the end of this year, and I might change my tune.
Well, listen, that we're kind of over the hour mark here. I just want to kind of have a few closing notes here. First of all, thank you everyone for joining us. We had very great attendance for those who RSVP'd. This was a wonderful kind of conversation. I'm sorry we couldn't get to more people, more games, more memories, but maybe there'll be more opportunities for that. In our follow-up email we'll send you guys tomorrow, some of the things Brian mentioned about some of these kind of court entrances and some of the fun stuff they did in the 80s, I've got videos of them. We're going to send those to you guys so you guys can see those. If you want to purchase a copy of Brian's work, we've got copies still available. We'll include a link or at least some information on how to buy one of these, and it's part of a donation that helps John Carroll Athletics as well. You know, just so you all remember, Pete's season is happening. The first game, I think, Pete, is January 22nd against Heidelberg. And there will be no fans, unfortunately, this year for any athletic event, but we are streaming every single game on jcusports.com. So make sure you check out the team's Twitter handles and their social media handles for that kind of information. And, you know, thank you so much for joining us. This was a wonderful kind of conversation. You know, we always ask if you're interested in supporting the university or supporting the team or the Blue Gold Club, you know, please go to jcu.edu/give, and there's those opportunities to support Pete, the team, the athletic department, and the university as a whole. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. And as always, go Blue Streaks. Stay safe and have a wonderful evening.